Trojans Talk Research is a monthly spotlight on the research interests of choice faculty presented by Troy University's Office of Sponsored Programs. This month features Dr. Avie Medeiros and Dr. Marie Kane discussing their research in rural education.
I am Dr. Avie Medeiros. I work actually in the history department, and I work with the history and social science education students. And
I am Dr. Kane, and I work in the College of Ed in the Department of Teacher Ed, and I also work with our secondary students.
All right, so we've started actually doing a lot of research in rural education. So I just wanted to kind of give a little background about why we picked rural ed to focus, and then we'll kind of go from there to our different research, grant activity, all the fun stuff. All right, so rural education, obviously we live in Alabama, and rural ed is a big part of what Alabama does. 1 in 3 of our school systems, or 1 in 3 of our students here in Alabama are rural students. Pike County, Troy is obviously in a rural area. And when I was a classroom teacher before I came to the university. And what I found, I had only ever attended or worked in larger schools. And then we moved to Pike County. I started teaching in a local rural school. And for me, even with, I think at that point I had 6 or 7 years teaching experience, it was a big leap, a big change going from a larger school to a much smaller school. And I also often referred to it as a culture shock because I didn't know what to make. It was just completely different from anything I'd ever done before. So when I got to Troy University and started working with our secondary students, what I found talking with them about working towards their internship, their field experiences, was either you fell into a category where you were very, very comfortable with rural ed because that's where you were from and that's what you liked, or you were from a larger area, a larger school, and you weren't comfortable and you tend to shy away from those experiences. And so I even saw just early on in my career that a lot of students weren't getting full rural exposure, even attending Troy, located in what is defined as a rural area. So fast forward to working on my doctorate dissertation, I really wanted to look how other teacher preparation programs were preparing teachers to teach rural. We know rural schools are our hardest to staff. We know they're most likely, especially in secondary, to have uncertified teachers teaching students. And I mean, I wanted to look at what we were doing to get our teachers, our future teachers, ready for these rural placements. Were we doing anything? So started with, there are 25 teacher preparation programs in the state of Alabama. 24 now. Judson College closed 2-3 years ago, maybe? I think it was 2. And so there are 24 teacher preparation programs, 25 at the time, 24 now. And I just started looking at how they represented rural in their programs. So I started going through their websites, any information they had publicly available on their teacher preparation programs. I'm looking for really 5 main things. Access for rural residents. You know, only out of the 25 programs, only 9 teacher preparation programs are located in a rural area. And Alabama is not exactly a huge state, but it's not small either. And so, you know, what do rural residents, what do they have to do to get a teacher? Where do they have to go? Is there access? Things like that. Are there any coursework focusing on rural ed or preparing students for rural ed? Looking at the more urban schools, like Birmingham has a lot of teacher preparation programs. Did the students attending those teacher preparation programs have any rural experiences, or were they all Birmingham area experiences, you know, suburb and urban? And then I knew I was going to forget one. One thing did come up a lot when I started looking at the different schools was multi-subject certification. The most common being getting an early childhood education degree and an elementary education degree together. So you graduate with 2 certificates. Another university did a special education certificate. We don't call it special education, we call it collaborative. Collaborative certificate and early elementary together. It's just that multi-subject, were you able to be certified to teach multiple things, just so you could be more adaptable in these small schools. And then recruitment. What are teacher preparation programs doing to reach out to these rural areas that have all these vacancies to attempt to try to find local homegrown people to become certified teachers and to fill it? And I mean, it was a much longer study than I ever thought when you set out to talk to 25 programs. I didn't get to talk to all 25, but I did talk to 19 of them. Interviews with either faculty, chairs of the teacher ed department, or deans. You just find out a lot. It was very interesting. But yeah, it's in a state as rural as Alabama, very few programs actually had any sort of rural focus. And yeah, I mean, Troy had some, of course, UWA had some. I mean, the more rural programs did, but very few other programs had rural aspects to the education. And so then Dr. Kane and I, because we worked together with our secondary students, really started taking this, and we did a paper last year on just looking more into rural education and what it means to be rural, or what it means to prepare our students to teach in rural areas.
And so, like, going off of that, like what we found, so we found this gap, right? We're in Alabama, we're in a rural area. These ed programs aren't producing, they're not creating programs that are actually helping these kids. We need to fill this gap, right? So our next step is we came up with a mentorship program. We call it MENT, mentoring and nurturing teachers.
Yes.
Oh,
mentoring, encouraging, nurturing teachers.
I was halfway there. And so we came up with this program. We're like, well, how can we help our teachers that we are putting out there, right? Because we know that about 50% of teachers drop out after the 5th year. Like, how are we going to help them? They're in these areas, you know, teaching, because I also taught high school for a while and middle school for about 11 years before I came here. And it's hard in the classroom, right? You can't teach somebody classroom management because every classroom and every student and every teacher is different, so it's really difficult. So we're like, let's create a program that actually helps keep the teachers that we have in these rural areas. And so we wrote a grant about it, and the goal was to create, okay, so what most schools in the area that we've noticed what they do is there's like, oh, you're a new teacher, here's a buddy. You can just ask her all your problems. And that's kind of their mentorship program. Sometimes it might be at the district level where they're like, oh, here is, you know, this person at this other school who's going to be your mentor. But what they really need is somebody who's not going to judge them, right? You might not be, because if you're in the district and you're talking, sometimes it can turn into gossip. The teacher can tell the principal or tell other people that they work with. So we were like, we need a third party to come in and mentor these people who don't have any bias, who are just there to help. And so we were going to recruit teachers that have retired or teachers not in that district who have spent a long time teaching to mentor these teachers. It would create more teacher retention. It would create more of a cohesive environment where the person felt, you know, comfortable to talk, whether it's email, text, or phone calls. You know, we'd have our mentors go out to the school once or twice a semester and visit with, you know, the teachers to see what they're actually dealing with when they're talking about classroom management or curriculum and things like that. And our idea was that if we created this, it would also increase the teacher self-efficacy, because they're like, oh, I'm having this problem right now, let me text this person and get a response. And so we tried to work on that, and we're still kind of pushing it out there, seeing if we can find somebody to pick it up, because one of the other problems that we found in education is the lack of, like, I don't want to say pay, but it's a lack of, they're not really treated like professionals all the time because people kind of look down on it, or the parents railroad them, or the administrator is not supportive. And so we wanted to show more of our appreciation of these people, you know, give them a supplement, help them, you know, build their stuff, that it is worthwhile if you're participating, because if somebody's paying you to do something, you're more likely to produce quality work. And so we wanted to add some of that in there. And we're just pushing for better rural preparation for our new teachers and support, because even the students that we put out there, you know, occasionally we'll see them and they talk to us, whether it's at Walmart or they'll email us if they're having issues, and it's just a big gap that we need to fill.
One of the areas, I think, when we started looking at trying to mentor our future teachers, what we discovered is a lot of these mentorship programs that are already in place, the teacher might be a veteran teacher. They may have been there 20 years when they were assigned this new teacher, but they don't know Just this morning, I got a text from a retired teacher, 28 years in the classroom, something like that. She was actually going to mentor a new teacher, and she was like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. Can you give me some tips, some pointers? So what we discovered is even these teachers that have been in the classroom for so long don't exactly know what they should bring to the table, what mentorship really is about. So we did write a grant we're waiting to hear back from, and it is to actually bring experienced teachers who would be a mentor teacher in a school here to Troy, offer some professional development, help them better understand how they can support these new teachers, because a lot of what we hear back, if the new teacher has a question, they're not really sure who to ask, where to go. I've been assigned, my very first mentor teacher popped by my room with a little basket of pens and said, let me know if you need anything. Well, I didn't even know what I needed, right? That was years and years and years ago. And so without any kind of formal training of how to support, how to offer glows and grows, here's what I see you're doing great, because we want to encourage teachers, not just tell them what they're doing wrong, but also say, hey, this is what I see that's going really right. And so being able to give them some actual concrete formal training that says these are ways that we can support teachers, we can help, in turn is going to be able to send these teachers back to their school. They're going to mentor and then create this environment, this climate where we've got a lot of positive support for our new teachers, which will hopefully, since obviously Troy's in a rural area, mean that we're getting a lot of rural support, and we will start seeing more rural retention in our schools, so more of our teachers staying rather than leaving in those first 5 years.
And so, we've written an article, we've had these grants, and now, what are the next steps for us? And so we are going to a conference, I think in March or April. In April, and it's a special ed in rural education. And so we're going to see, because that's a big component, right? When you go out in the classroom and you're teaching, you have these kids in your class, and you're like, what do you do? How do you work with them? And so we're going to attend this conference, and we're looking for answers. How can we incorporate special education into our secondary ed? What's the best way to do that? Because, both of us are history, social science, education majors. And so when we look at what we're going to do with that, we need to figure out how we can incorporate more and more, right? These multi-subject certifications that are needed. It's so hard to find a special ed teacher. Here at Troy, I think we graduate maybe 1 or 2 a semester.
It is the hardest to staff position in the state, special education, which, obviously schools need more of, not less of, and it's one of the hardest to staff positions we have in the state of Alabama. So looking at more ways to incorporate that into just our teacher education, we're just trying to make sure that our teacher candidates have, I call it the toolbox. I always tell them that we're just adding to their toolbox, so when they go to teach, they have this box, the toolbox ideas ready to go, and we're just trying to keep adding to that so our students have what they need to go be successful in these classrooms.
And so that's kind of our next step with our stuff, trying to, hopefully these grants will make out so we can, actually implement a lot of our research. But, we're still doing it kind of on our own level, working with the kids what we can. And then seeing where we go from here. But I think just overall, all the stuff that we're doing, we're trying, our end goal is just to create better teachers and to have teachers stay in the classroom, because, we've seen a drop in enrollment just across the board in secondary and in elementary, and it's getting really hard to staff, and we need more people. And the State Department, is working on ways that they can increase, teachers, to increase the number of teachers we have out there, but more is better.
Trojans Talk Research is a monthly spotlight on the research interests of Troy's faculty, presented by Troy University's Office of Sponsored Programs.